Hi everyone, and thanks for taking the time to listen to this webinar. My intention is to go through the most relevant points and actions that need to be addressed by CEOs in this new age where technology seems to have changed most of the business fundamentals that prevailed over the last decades. This year, digital transformation has become one of the very top priorities for organizations as they seek to adapt their products and services to the modern marketplace. However, one of the most common mistakes that we can make is to try to set a digital strategy by itself, where the real challenge is to establish a business strategy that fits into the digital age. I believe we all agree that industry is becoming more and more information intensive and less labor and capital intensive. In the classical model, investments in human capital and financial capital were important predictors of the success of a new venture. Nowadays, as demonstrated by Uber, Facebook, Airbnb, and many others, it now seems possible for a group of relatively inexperienced people to succeed on a large scale. We are in the midst of a digital revolution, and let me stress that the most important meaning of the word revolution for us is the uncertainty and the lack of linear thinking, if we think forward. We are in between those peaks and valleys that you can see at the right side of the slide, heading to an information society that we still don't know how it will look like. Internet is often considered to be the main trigger and the first branch of the digital era. 10 to 15 years ago, businesses thought that the key strategy was to have the most complete and attractive website, and for those businesses which were into the B2C, to start using e-commerce as a new distribution channel. But the thing, now that we are 15 years later, is that we were just seeing the top part of the iceberg, because the situation has changed dramatically. We only have to see the speed at which the different technologies gain traction and reach maturity. Each new computing cycle typically generates around 10 times the install base of the previous one. Actually, the percentage of access to the internet through mobile has now surpassed the one that we do through PCs. But what companies did not realize was the extraordinary invasion of technologies in our daily lives. I'm pretty sure that you have already seen those two pictures with the comparison in between the ordination of Pope Francis and the ordination of Pope Benedict in 2005. There's only 8 years difference, but we can see how mobile is becoming part of our daily lives. Concerts, sports, and everyday life events are now documented through a mobile device. There is a funny but real statistic that says that 96% of smartphone owners have it less than 1 meter from their body 24 hours a day. It's a pity that this digital seminar doesn't allow me to make a poll with all of you. I wonder if you've ever seen yourselves in a lunch or in a dinner with friends where they were paying more attention to WhatsApps and text messages than to the conversation itself. Does it sound familiar to you? All of these may have remained just as part of our personal lives, but actually it has a big influence in the way we do business. One of the collateral effects of technology and the extraordinary process of disintermediation brought by the internet is the power shift to the customer. We tend to compare startups with traditional companies as Davids fighting against Goliaths. But the real David is now the customer, who has more power than ever to take purchasing decisions based on the value they receive or they perceive. Over the last century, businesses have evolved from a product-centric strategy to a more distributed one, where initially stores and afterwards channels, depending on the size and nature of the companies, have become more and more important. In our age, every organization has to rethink and reimagine its business model, processes and technology, taking into account the customer journey, whose habits are also changing rapidly forcing us to be much more agile. Just take the example of Tesla, the electric car manufacturer. It doesn't have any dealerships. Customers can configure and order cars online. They are not just reinventing the car, they are reinventing the whole industry model. But customers are by definition human beings, and we have our feelings, our personalities, our emotions, our desires. And in the same way, we are looking for features that make companies distinctive. And we no longer rely on publicity. It is our own experience in our digital lives, the one that makes the difference. We look for users' experience, for Apple's simplicity and design, for the immediacy of Twitter. And this is even more relevant if we consider that we are less and less interested in products and more in the service itself. For instance, we no longer want to have a car. We don't want to own a car. We just want to have the keys. And that makes a big difference. This leads to the definition of digital transformation as the realignment of our business model, technology, and processes to more effectively engage digital customers at every point in their customer experience lifecycle. This definition is coming from a leading analyst firm in the US, Altimeter Group. Let me emphasize that it is the customer the one who has become digital. And this is what enforces the transformation for the companies, but it is the customer the one who became digital. And digital, in itself, is a business buzzword, and a sort of euphemism for the word technology. Technology, business-wise, is not fancy, since it's all about computers. Digital, on the other side, is like a lifestyle. Digital disruption affects every industry, although at very different levels. Some industries have progressed very far in terms of digitization. Think about media and music distribution. Some others, for example, have barely been affected, like for example basic materials and mining operations. In between, we have those business models which are being transformed in a natural way, although it is sometimes hard to set the boundaries. If we take the commercial banking industry, their model has been traditionally based on their branches, and it is now becoming more and more customer-centric. We just heard that one of the top financial institutions in Spain, Banco Santander, is planning to close around 450 branches, together with 1,200 job cuts. One of the most powerful external forces is actually the competition. I'm sure you have all heard the term unicorn. It refers to those startups privately held, which value exceeds $1 billion. This graph represents the different unicorns created over the last years, and we can certainly state that the pace at which unicorns has been created has accelerated notably over the last couple of years. And one of the biggest mistakes that we can make as CEOs is to think that these companies only base their value in technology. And that's definitely not the case. Just take the sharing economy as an example. New business models are arising where there is no direct relationship between assets and value, between your balance sheet and your competitive advantage. Uber, Facebook, or Airbnb are few examples of a new business model that is reshaping different industries. Funny enough, Uber has now a higher market valuation than Ford, Honda, or General Motors, companies that they have to thank simply for existing. Or let me take another example which was brought by Internet's omnipresence. The term long tail was coined in 2004 by Chris Anderson, chief editor of Wired magazine. Anderson argued that products that are in low demand or have low sales volume can collectively make up a market share that rivals or exceeds the relatively few current bestsellers and blockbusters, but only if the store or distribution channel is large enough. Amazon is a clear example, and this concept is absolutely embedded in their strategy of looking for economies of scale. Just as a small wrap-up, we have analyzed the changes in the business context and how the empowered digital customers are provoking major disruptions. We have gone through the concept of digital transformation and how it is creating new business models where startups are able to compete with traditional companies. The question is now how companies need to adapt themselves to this new concept. Let's start with the challenges. And guess what? Most of the challenges are around the internal culture and organization. Companies with big legacy suffer from a lack of balance between flexibility or agility and control. They tend to work in silos, with a task-focused approach, and are seldom objective-focused. This graph comes also from Altimeter and shows the top challenges for the transformation, according to a recent survey. And more, the CEO listens to internal voices who demand a profound change. Some of them, like the ones on the left, come from the marketing and sales, and refer to the whole concept of customer experience. Some others, like the ones on the right, look more into the value chain, operations, and internal processes. But both of them are part of the same puzzle and should be aimed at giving the customers the higher value with a holistic approach. This doesn't only affect the strategy, but also the management tools. Not very long ago, vertical integration was the cutting edge of global business. Today, business leaders stake their success on the opposite model of development. Increasingly, agility is the determining factor of market competitiveness. In the last decade, we have seen new best practices for startups, which are now being adopted by corporations to address new market challenges. Lean startup, customer development, business model canvas are now sets of tools commonly used by companies to rethink their strategy and go back to the essence. And the essence, to a certain extent, is to work like a startup. Customer journeys, empathy maps, visual management, design thinking are concepts which are starting to position themselves in the new way of management. And they do not just pursue the customer value. They also aim at changing the company culture, involving the employees and fighting against the silos. Of course, technology plays a very important role. You've probably heard the concept of SMAC, social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. These capacities are essential to play in the new foreground, and this is rapidly evolving with new and real possibilities: Internet of Things, robotics, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, etc., etc. All in all, digital transformation requires a holistic approach. This is one of the most well-known models from the MIT. It sets 3 different layers on the areas of customer experience, operational processes, and business models. Each of these 3 pillars have 3 different elements that are changing. These 9 elements form a set of building blocks for digital transformation. The most relevant message from this graph is that the approach should be a modular one. Each company, depending on their industry, context, objectives, and own capabilities, should determine their journey. What we see in the market is that companies are currently putting a lot of attention to their omni-channel strategy, since they are experiencing a lot of pressure to provide an integrated experience from multiple channels. On the operational side, process digitization is still an objective for many corporations. And what is more relevant for the CEO, there is a strong need to address new business models. It's not about changing the way we do technology. It's about changing the way we do business. This is not about big data, just to take an example, but about the business possibilities created by managing and actioning the existing data that we have ourselves. All in all, the CEO and its management team need to set a vision. Let me reinforce that this is not about creating a digital strategy, but a business strategy that fits into the new context. This holistic approach can only start by addressing the existing capabilities in 4 different angles: people skills, organization, processes, and technology, which should help us to define our strategy and journey. As this involves the redefinition and reconsideration of our current strategy, there needs to be a holistic view. It is not the intention of this webinar to go through all the necessary steps, but we would like to emphasize one important element that we see as key in this journey. Every company should address what we call the digital funnel, which is a sort of combining the new way of working, the redefinition of the customer value chain, and the innovation that has to be included as an essential ingredient for this recipe. Actually, this funnel looks like a key that every company should be able to shape, as it will be different and adapted to each one. On the left side, we see how Digital Lab, the name is not relevant in this case, needs to be fed by all stakeholders, which includes our customers in a co-creation mode, partners or providers in a sort of open innovation, and our internal IT department. This digital factory needs to apply a different way of working, cross-discipline, horizontal, eliminating silos, and integrating functions that used to work independently. And this is where the big transformation starts, and where we need a special focus on managing the change of our organization. This is where resistance will flourish, especially with middle management who might feel threatened by this change, and where the specific vision and leadership of the CEO has to stand out. Let me finish this webinar with this quote from Mark Twain. Once we have set the vision, we have analyzed our capabilities, and have established our journey, it is time to start. Stop thinking and start doing. Time never goes back. Thanks again for your time.